Welcome back to Just Talking. We have a great show for you today. Why? Because we have a special guest, Tia Nelson, a climate consultant, and just a number of things she's done for the environment. And Tia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's great to be with you.
Well, Tia, let's start off now. I said climate consultant, but I think most people also know you as the daughter of Gaylord Nelson. And maybe for those who don't know who Gaylord Nelson, who was he?
Well, my father was a public servant. He served in the state senate. He served 2 terms as governor of the state of Wisconsin and 3 terms as United States senator. And he accomplished a lot of things in those many years, but is, as you pointed out, probably most well known for being the founder of Earth Day.
Let's talk about that. How did that all come about, him, where Earth Day came about, that idea?
Well, I think its deep origins really are in the little town that my father grew up in as a child, with nature as his playground. He was born in Clear Lake in Polk County in northwestern Wisconsin, and loved the outdoors and fished and camped, canoed along the rivers there near his hometown. And when he was 10 years old, his father, my grandfather, who was the town doctor, drove him in a Model T Ford from Clear Lake to Amory, and he saw a speech by Bob La Follette Jr. And at that point, decided at that very young age that he wanted to grow up and be a United States senator and help people. So that was the beginning of his journey. In terms of his environmental work as a public official, when he was elected governor, he became known as the conservation governor. He put a penny a pack tax on cigarettes and funded the acquisition of state parks, recreation areas, boat launches, natural areas, and using the proceeds of this tax on cigarettes. And that earned him the moniker, the conservation governor. He got elected to the Senate, and he went to Washington, very concerned about clean water, clean air, and environmental issues along those lines, and couldn't find anybody particularly interested in his environmental agenda. And he persuaded in 1963 President Kennedy to launch a conservation tour. And that tour was cut short. It failed to accomplish what my father had hoped. The president was assassinated several months later. And in the years that followed, between 1963 and 1969, my father struggled with finding a way to bring these issues forward. And he went out to Santa Barbara, California, to look at the largest oil spill at the time in American history. And coming home, he read a magazine article about how anti-war teach-ins on college campuses were impacting the narrative about the Vietnam War. And that's when he got an idea. And the idea was that he would call for a national teach-in on the environment and set aside a day and invite teachers to teach on whatever issues they thought were relevant in their community. And it was successful beyond his wildest dreams.
Was it all over the country, or just in certain areas, or how did that work?
Well, it took off like gangbusters and penetrated communities in every state in the nation in a way that my father didn't anticipate. It went way beyond his original idea of having college campuses and high schools and junior high schools have an environmental teach-in day. 20 million people gathered on that day. It was the largest event in American history, and in every community and in many communities in every state of the nation did something, whether it was trash pickup, which is what I was doing at my junior high school, or raising money for a local project, or protesting, or doing education. There was a whole diversity of sort of responses, which was, I think, really a critical element of the success of Earth Day. My father didn't attempt to prescribe what people should do, only encourage them to engage in their community in something that was meaningful to them.
Well, it worked, because they're doing it today as we speak. couple quotes you would say, the job isn't finished. So what more needs to be done?
Yes, well, I don't think the job will ever be finished. Our responsibilities and the challenges of uh, forging a sustainable future and balance between man and nature, humans and nature, will always be before us. Really, the biggest environmental challenge we face today is unquestionably climate change. You know, the good news is we know what the solutions are, and they're readily available to us. And the challenge is to create that social and political will to take the actions necessary to reduce the threat of climate change.
How about today compared to back then? Have we gotten better with clean water and clean air?
Well, we've gotten much better. There have been enormous strides. In 1969, there was no Environmental Protection Agency, and the job of that agency is to protect every American's right to breathe clean air and drink clean water. There was no Clean Air Act. There was no Clean Water Act. The Cuyahoga River was on fire. It was so polluted. It was caught fire and burned for days. So we've made some really big improvements in air and water quality, but we have much more to do. And I think the challenge will always be there and require our diligence.
Another quote, are we able? Yes. Are we willing? That's the question. What did he mean by that?
Well, my father always believed that we have the means, the resources, and the science to establish sound public policy to protect public health, clean air, clean water, but that it will take a substantial investment on the part of all of us to ensure a clean environment for all. And when on the eve of the first Earth Day, he was speaking to the possibilities as being quite enormous. You know, do we have the wherewithal to dedicate the resources necessary to protect the environment for all?
Now let's talk about you. After Earth Day, did you get involved more with the environment or more into politics as the years went on?
Yes, well, I went to the University of Wisconsin and studied wildlife ecology. I always had a passion for nature, which I guess I inherited from my dad, and my experiences as a young person with him exploring the North Woods of Wisconsin, a place he and I both had quite a passion for. So I studied wildlife ecology. I worked in the state legislature on environmental policy for about 5 years. And then I went to Washington, and for almost 20 years, I worked for the Nature Conservancy, traveled the world working on the protection of biodiversity, the protection of rainforests in Central and South America, addressing the issues around climate change. And then I returned to Wisconsin more than 15 years ago now to run the Public Lands Commission for Wisconsin, and then later to be work on climate change education at the Outrider Foundation.
Let's hear your thoughts on solar energy.
What we know is that the costs of renewable energy are now less expensive than fossil fuels and are non-polluting. We know that they create American jobs. We know that Wisconsin's in a good position with its manufacturing history to be a part of the renewal that will come with using clean energy. And we also have a lot of opportunities around land use. Regenerative agriculture can be part of the climate change solution and help us address other challenges as well.
Because I want an electric car. I think that, you know, again, looking in the future, and the new administration is also pushing for that too as well.
Well, look, you know, Volvo will only be manufacturing electric vehicles by 2025, I think it is. You know, some exciting things are happening in the clean energy world.
What can we do as a community to help the environment?
Well, I think there's each and every one of us has the power to make a difference. We need to talk within our communities about what our particular challenges are. We need to work as individuals to be responsible citizens, to engage with our community and being part of the solution, not part of the problem. We need to talk to our elected officials and say what issues we're worried about and ask them to lead on those issues. There's just an unlimited number of things one can do. I happen to love gardening, so I grow some of my own vegetables, but I compost my food waste. Here's an interesting fact for you. If food waste were a country, it would be the third largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the world after the United States and China. That's crazy. And in the United States, we throw away a substantial percentage of the food we grow, and think of the energy inputs that go into growing that food, transporting that food, storing that food. And we're wasting a lot of it. In the developing world, there's, that particular outcome wouldn't happen because no one who's poor in there would, buy food and then throw it away. But we think nothing of it and have a moldy grapes in the back of the refrigerator and toss them into the trash, and then they are producing methane gases, plus wasting all the energy that went into producing that food. Before the first Earth Day, throwing trash out of your car as you drove down the highway was something that commonly happened. Today, it would be unusual to go into a household where someone isn't sorting, recycling from trash. My point being that these individual actions do matter. They're not enough, and we really need strong science-based policies at the local, state, federal level, and we need to cooperate as individuals in our communities in trying to build that brighter future, and talk about it, think about it, act upon it, use the tools we have and the resources available to us to make a difference.
There's always a lot of great awareness with some of the recent films, Inconvenient Truth, and then there's Revenge of the Electric Car. And then you were in some participating in some videos for awareness. The PBS Education did one on Gaylord Nelson, and then also When the Earth Moves on the Outriders. Maybe you can talk a little bit about those videos.
Yes, well, PBS, Wisconsin Public Television, has a beautiful series of biographies about Wisconsinites, and I had the delight of narrating this animated story of my father's life. They're short 4-minute videos. It's a great resource. I would encourage folks to look at it. In terms of the film that I made for the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, I recruited a youth activist, Varshini Prakash, co-founder of the Sunrise Movement, and a former Republican congressman named Bob Inglis, two people from very different backgrounds and political persuasions, came to the table to work together, saying this is a critical issue and we have to work together to solve it. It's why I've been working with, it's been a real delight. You may know Brent Suter, one of the Milwaukee Brewers pitchers. Brent Suter has served as Outriders Climate Ambassador. He's a very committed environmentalist. What I like about working with a guy like Bob Inglis, the former Republican congressman from North Carolina, or Brent Suter, is they are reaching audiences that perhaps I wouldn't reach. I'm not a big sports person. I don't come from the conservative Republican South, but both of these men have dedicated their lives to living their values, talking about the critical issues of climate change and the environment. And only by building bridges to diverse audiences can we really create that political will that my father talks so much about. And so when we made the film, for the 50th anniversary, I wanted to reflect that my father's original vision was bipartisan, it was multi-generational, and it had a significant call to action around social justice. And working with people like Bob and Brent and Varshini, my hope is that by having this conversation, coming to the table, talking about our values and what's important to us, that we can help build that diverse political will for action.
Another activist that's been in the media is Greta Tunberg. Have you ever talked with her and say maybe we'll join forces or anything like that?
No, I haven't met her. I haven't met Greta. I'm a admirer of hers, and I think this is a useful story for your audience to reflect on. You know, when my father called for the first Earth Day, it was successful beyond his wildest dreams. He could not have imagined the outcome any more than Rosa Parks could have known when she refused to move to the back of the bus, that simple, quiet act of defiance would change the trajectory of the civil rights movement and the course of American history, any more than Greta Tunberg. I mean, think of this. She was a shy, young kid. She was very concerned about climate change. She drew a handmade sign and went and sat in front of the Swedish parliament on Fridays by herself, protesting the lack of action on climate change. She couldn't possibly have known that simple act of protest quietly in that manner would, in essence, launch a global youth movement on climate change. Any more than Rosa Parks could have known what her actions would result in, or my father, what his call to action for an environmental teach-in would mean. And so to me, that's where I get my sense of hope, that unimaginable outcomes can come from simple acts of principle. Greta Thunberg is certainly an example of the power of individual action at a unique moment in history, just as Rosa Parks and my father were in their own way, in their own manner and time.
Then I'll leave it with the last question is, what does Earth Day mean to you?
Well, obviously it's personal. I was very close with my father, and I've dedicated my life to advocating for a clean environment. And so it has personal resonance. It's a source of great inspiration for me, something that I try to celebrate every day. And you know, it's just had a big impact on my life and how people have reflected on my father's legacy. And I think back to that little boy from that little town in northern Wisconsin with this really big dream, and how that dream came true. And that is always a source of joy and gratitude for me.
Tia Nelson, thank you so much for talking with us today. You've just done great work over the years, and we thank you for help improving the environment. And thank you so much for your time with us today.
Oh, I'm so glad to be with you today, and thanks for your interest in telling this story. I'm grateful.